Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. So I thought maybe we'd talk about something a little different today, or this morning. You may know that we are able to be data scientists for about 15 years now. That's not such a long time. And so I thought I'd start by asking you how many of you are, have been, or aspire to work in a data team? Not bad. Are you not in data, but work with people in data teams? Yeah. If you haven't raised your hand yet, are you working in a company that has a data team? All right, so it looks like we got the majority. And you may have heard this, but back in 2012, we were all told the data scientist is the sexiest job of the 21st century. And it was later reviewed and revisited by the same authors of that article in 2022, wondering, is it still the sexiest job of the 21st century? Also in 2019, the chief decision scientist at Google wrote a post about how data scientists are actually the sexiest job of the 22nd century. So it looks like we have a good outlook, right? Though that article was kind of critical of where we are right now. It seems like almost everyone, maybe I'm biased because I work in data, so it seems to me like almost everyone wants to build ML products, offer AI services, or be a data scientist. And maybe recently you sensed something. Because this field, while it's already 15 years old, is constantly changing. This is the last year Google search terms worldwide, and we've already heard a lot at this event about GPT, about large language models. And for those of us who have been working in data for the past 15 years, it might seem like an endless game of catch. And really managing new and rapidly changing business functions is not easy. Business function is a very business term, so if you're not in management, let me take a moment to explain it. But in general, it's just a term describing an area of ongoing operations that needs management. And lots of us are managed, maybe all of you if you're not independent. We'll talk about this a bit more later. For now, you can think of it as a department or team that performs certain tasks that other teams don't perform. So the business as a whole stays operational or functional. And it is sometimes hard for us to accept that we would be, it isn't hard for us to accept as a business that we would be better off if a lawyer wrote our business contracts or agreements. It took some time, but I think a lot of places have already come to understand that a designer's opinion about the brand is more important than the executive's team's favorite colors. Can we clearly draw the line between data science, engineering, products, and services? Are we even supposed to? And do we have aligned expectations on these things and how we make decisions about them in an organization? So for today, I want to talk to you about 3 things. And this will not be specific points. It will be more of an ongoing rambling as I move between them. So we'll start with what is management and build some shared understanding. We'll talk about the challenges we're facing. And hopefully, at the end, we'll see that there's still some positive outlook for us all. So what is data teams management? No data team exists in a vacuum. We can talk about data scientists separately from data engineering, product teams, BI, business objectives, all the rest, which is why, in preparation for this, I also spoke to 20-odd people working very different roles from each other and different seniority levels, and trying to get a bit more of a perspective about what is it we're doing and how are we achieving things or not. Also, the data function is not a snowflake, a unicorn, or a butterfly. A lot of our management challenges are common to other functions, business domains, and so on. We have a lot to learn from them, and we could possibly also discuss our issues together. Management is a very broad domain. Moreover, so I would like to ask you, maybe raise your hand if you think you can come up with a tweet-length definition of management. Not a lot of takers. Mine is this. It's essentially about how we organize to achieve goals. So when I mean organize here, since as an organizer, I organize a lot of things, I mean how do we make arrangements and trade-offs. You may have heard, this isn't a new concept, about the 3 Ps of management, and I know there are a lot of different ones. There's also versions with 4 and 5. There's many, many variations on this. I do think that the original is kind of a tried-and-true framework and a useful baseline. So in case you haven't heard it before, I'll try to also use this as a thread throughout the rest of my talk. It's people, processes, and platforms. And even in the emerging field of AI, managers can think about their work with the 3 Ps. We lead and empower people. They have motivations, interests, skills, ambitions. We need to collaborate with other people in the organization. Culture is key to people. Sometimes, after people start joining a founding team of a small organization, processes will start to emerge, and we will eventually start to even dictate how those should change. We're trying to coordinate, structure, and organize work among those people and their peers. And along the way, throughout, either on purpose or not, folks working in a specific domain will make countless decisions about platforms, skills, and tools that they want to build, use, and so on, from using Python as your programming language to anything else about your stack or infrastructure or what it is you're building. I think the key verbs here are lead and organize, and managers don't make decisions by themselves. They balance trade-offs. A lot of our work here as managers is similar to other domains. As if I'm talking about meta-management level, if you generalize management as a business function by itself, a lot of things seem similar. And the crux is in the details. Some of our challenges as data teams, as managers, are similar but specific. And my goal today is to get into these specifics, and hopefully, when I run out of time, leave you with some food for thought and further ideas for discussion outside. So, some managers, I want to point out, are already doing really great work and sharing their know-how. I really recommend that you check Shir's talk from last year at this conference about processes that she and her colleagues set up. One moment, let me grab some water. And I'm not going to tell you today about how I solved for the 3 Ps at a specific company. I am going to share, I think there are other examples that can inspire you, but at the end of the day, every data team will need to manage their own way. We do see some patterns and overarching themes across organization if you talk to 20+ people like I just did. So how are we actually managing? I think management, from a brief look at past schedules of this very conference, and that means it's also on me, is one of the least discussed topics. At PyData events, we often talk about the 3rd P, about platforms. We hardly at all talk about people and processes. And so I'm not going to talk about platforms this morning. So let me get into my first problem. What does it even mean to be a data scientist? We talked about the sexy title in the beginning. We're all hyped up for this. But let me ask you this. Can you raise your hand if you can come up with a tweet-length definition for the role data scientist? And then keep your hand raised, if you can. Any definition. Not that many. Keep those hands up for a moment. Would you please only lower your hand if you think that definition is possibly unique to your organization? Or is it overall the same? So, it seems that we have a lot of titles out there, and even the single title, data scientist, that started us on this journey is hard to define. Only this morning, I was browsing LinkedIn, as I do, and I saw a new title that I've never seen before, which the author of the post claims should now be all the rage, and we should all be hiring for data translators. I am not sure how many of you will ever work with data translators. I'm not saying it's not relevant or valid, and it sounded like a really interesting take, but we have so many titles. This is the result of just a quick samplings of jobs that were posted on LinkedIn of so-called data scientist jobs. Some of these require several years of experience in the description in data strategy and governance and data products and data architecture and data science, preferably with DBT, which, by the way, exists, I think, only from 2021. So I'm not sure how you could have so many years of experience beyond 2. I've started calling this the zoo of titles. My problem here isn't that we have so many roles. That might actually be a good thing. But it is very hard for us to understand what these titles are. We don't have a shared language. And these job descriptions, we don't really know what they stand for. Even experienced data folks have told me that they are dreading if next they will be looking for a job or want to change because the job market is just so confusing. Your own title might not be meaningful for your next role because some data scientists are mostly doing data engineering or data analytics. Some data engineers or data analysts are mostly doing data science or data engineering. Some software engineers are doing machine learning engineering, and even all of those things, which are relatively common, are not the same in different organizations. Why is this unique? Data scientists, lots of people want a developer and don't know what developer they need. Lots of people want a designer and don't know what kind of designer they need as well, or lawyer, as I mentioned before. The issue here is that not only do we not have a shared language within the field, but also outside of our domain, we don't have a good idea, folks don't have a good idea about the nuances and these differences between the roles or the actions or the processes that we need to achieve or the platforms that we use. More often than not, I see folks that accept, if not understand, that they should be getting someone who understands programming to build a programming team. And maybe they actually need a team rather than one person, because several things need to be done in order to achieve a goal. But as a product or service research and development project, data science and data teams in general are as varied a domain as any other dev team or product team. Building something that other people use requires discovery, UX, architecture, development, QA, test automation, integration. So far, so similar. But when we ship a product or a solution for things that are not data-driven, things work differently than for things that are data-driven. What do I mean by that? Most of our solutions are deterministic in nature in classic engineering. And even if things are not deterministic, they are well captured by a set of heuristics. Otherwise, you don't need any data, folks. And of course, we often solve for humans, so it's not necessarily easy to do, but we can still define a solution or arrive at one after some process, and we might even rely on it for some time. There are products and services out there that have not changed significantly for many years that we use. But in data teams, that's not the case. Whether it's data analytics that design and experiment and evaluate cause and effect, whether it's data science where they model a solution where occurrences can't be perfectly predicted, build that model, all of this is inherently probable. These drifts in data that can develop over time, errors in experiment design, all of these issues, they take time to figure out, to discover. It is going to require a lot more maintenance work for any data product or service, and potentially higher effort on monitoring, analysis, and continuous delivery than non-data-driven products and services. And that means that potentially you might need a bigger team and not a single person. It is also often managed differently. I see many times folks from C-level to product managers to engineers that are thinking or deciding that they need a data scientist, an analyst, a data engineer, often singular. Really what they need is a team, maybe several teams, a department, and possibly to listen to that person who understands those nuances and the domain really well. And more often than not, data manager isn't sufficiently empowered in the organization, whether that is budget or folks listening to them, because there's just so much other information out there. This is really odd to me, because this is a department that often quantifies the business success and progress. So I really hope that more people will be investing more in having larger data departments. But why is this happening to us? Why are we? Is it just because we're so young? Is it just because it's only 15 years? The problem is often about unrealistic expectations, and we help drive the hype, so it's a little bit on us. Why can't we have better expectations of what we can and can't do in our field after 15 years? Well, it depends. Sometimes it is the hype. There are folks who want to be involved and make decisions in AI because it's cool, it's trending. I see so many executives posting this right now about large language models. Some folks are rushing to data science and machine learning, to analytics, because they want to have the people or the product before they even put in data engineering in place. Sometimes it's misestimation. We said if folks don't know the nuances well, misplanning. Maybe they want to get a lot fast, but they're often relying on what they understand and building deterministic things. And so they don't necessarily estimate the time and budget reasonably, so either before they hire the right people or even after. We all know that estimating how long our project takes or how risky they are is hard. We ourselves can also make mistakes and get it wrong. There's also a lot of services out there that, and tools that promise DIY or do-it-yourself solutions. That's great. It's empowering, but it can be confusing for people who don't do this work or have never done this work themselves to understand their limits and why we can't rely on them by ourselves or go faster. And like I mentioned before, there's the zoo. It makes hiring really hard. It makes finding the right people hard. It makes developing people and keeping them, keeping talent really, really hard. And you can probably get a bunch more answers to this question from talking to other folks around here and their own personal experience. Now, this title zoo that I keep mentioning is a symptom, but it also has adverse effects beyond hiring. One of the most common themes that I've been hearing about in my conversations are issues with job satisfaction and career development in data teams. I think I could talk just on this for hours, so I wanted to focus for you on one point that kept coming up in my conversations, and that is the topic of generalist versus specialist. For some folks, it can be very obvious, very natural for you to make a decision, or maybe it doesn't even feel like a decision, about whether you as an individual want to be a generalist or a specialist, or whether you want to make a switch between those at a certain time. But in a new and rapidly developing domain, there's also a lot of push and pull in many different directions at once. And if you're not confident in what is right for you, which is common, then every time you open your professional digital media source of choice, there seem to be 100 new directions you can go in, 100 new platforms and tools you should have already mastered, and it's really hard to keep up with. And generalizing, I think, and have heard, that it will be great for you in your career in both small and large companies. You will be able to collaborate and understand business needs, solutions across the whole data stack, which is great. But more and more, as we try to solve for our title zoo, we are trying to narrowly define people, like a data translator, and we're trying to create specialists. And we want ML ops rather than an ML ops engineer rather than an ML engineer. We want a machine learning data scientist rather than a machine learning researcher. We want to have someone specifically to do QA, someone specifically to do data engineering within a data science team. We have seen all of these trends also in engineering and design. So please remember, if you're an individual contributor, if you're a manager, the generalists are always helpful, and many great careers come from lateral moves. But data folks are also curious beings. They like to learn, to apply, to make measurable impact. Don't try to create too rigid paths for personal development. As managers, try to listen and offer as much flexibility and support as you can, because working in such a fast-changing and new field is really hard on the individuals themselves. And I keep talking about the individuals, but this also applied to us as managers, or as leads. There are a lot of managers, and I'm hearing this directly from them, but also from folks who are talking about how they are managed, that are wearing many, many hats. They are your people manager, they are your technical lead, they are your product manager, and maybe even a few other things. We need to consider the variety of management roles and hats that we have, just as much as a dev team can have several different managers managing people and domains and technical expertise. It's time for our data teams to do that as well. And of course, this might not work for every organization, but just consider if maybe one of the reasons your manager isn't working so well is because we're asking too much of them too. Another topic that comes up a lot is data consumers and data generators, and how well do we work together. This is also how we differ sometimes from other development teams, that we don't necessarily own end-to-end everything. Often, we work with data that's being generated in marketing team, in finance, in engineering teams, and so on. And here there's a saying from a very famous management consultant from a while back that says that culture eats strategy from breakfast. And I think that here, more than you need a process, you need to work well with people. So engineers, marketing, all of these folks, all of these departments, whether it's within your team or across your data teams, if the data team itself or the individuals are not invested in data quality, in the solutions, and in getting to solutions and results together with the data generators, it's going to be very hard to achieve anything at all. If someone analyze their own A/B tests and always uses t-tests by themselves because that's what they know, or an automated tool, they're not going to have great results if they haven't collaborated with a data analyst. If someone else is able to, is a developer and doesn't write tests for their tracking, and suddenly we have gaps in data that is critical for a model, then because they find tracking work to be boring or unimportant, or just why do we need to test for that, then that's a problem. There are also engineers who are trying to work on machine learning products on their own, which is great, but maybe coordinate at least with the data team who's also doing similar work. All of these are the same as having you write your own hiring contracts, even though you hired a lawyer to do that, or designing your own product based on your personal preferences. And we make these mistakes a lot. They happen. One other point that comes up is that a lot of folks are like, we reorged again. And every time someone comes and tells me, oh yeah, we reorged, I'm like, celebrate that. That's great. This should happen. This is a natural process of managing organizations. Your team, should it be embedded? Should it be centralized? Should it be hybrid? How many teams should you have? Do you need a data platform team on its own to service the other teams? There's a lot of best practices here, but you always have to adjust for your current situation. These changes and making these changes over time is valuable. Timing them, getting the right buy-in is hard, and that's what sometimes makes managing teams at all in general hard. But the truth is that our organization's maturity, scale, the sense of urgency, psychological safety, overall, and specifically for data teams, is just too much to discuss in a couple of slides. So I'm going to save this for a future presentation, or maybe one of you will. One more thing. So far, a lot of this is relevant for people who are working with data folks. But we all have a part in this. Some of the most important things that we need to figure out as folks who are working in data teams is that through all of the hype, all the excitement, you also need to own some hard truths. You are expensive, and you need to deliver value. And it's hard to deliver value, as I said before. Sometimes we get things wrong. But what is sometimes most important to you, or seems crucial to you, if you think you're at odds with your manager or with your organization, you need to understand that you want to be at a place where you are not managed as a data team strictly as a cost center. You need to be very mindful of return on investment or ROI for your role and for your team. You need to be very mindful of how data teams overall produce business value, how efficient you are, and how good your communication skills are. These things will take time. When you start, you focus on your skills that have to do with platforms and tools. But you need to remember that you can't indulge too much in the things that brought you to the role. And you need to develop also things that will make you successful and make your whole team and department successful. You will be managed and supported in making trade-offs. Should I get into a new thing? Should we keep trying to do exploratory analysis? Or should we just drop this and try to do something else? Or decide that actually we're not going to be modeling for the next quarter? I want to encourage all of you to think of exploratory phases of data science models as discovery phases for products in general. You can't accept that another product team will be in discovery mode for 6 months or more. But we see this very often with data teams. Some of you maybe are already in a large organization with high maturity, are moving faster. But there are folks, and also folks who are coming into our field, who were not trained for the pace and urgency of business. And I think it's really important that you should know how much your team made profit or lost for your company, how much risk you are creating or saving with your work. And yeah, that also means you should care about your code quality, your test packagings, SLAs, ops, everything. If you're building tools that, or products that other people use, you need to be professional about it. And you can't just not want to or worry about when or other people see your code or how delicate it is. So the wonderful culture of collaboration, and again, this is where culture is key, will really help you here. Instead of worrying about how wrong everything is or how hard it is to do things, you should come up with ways for you to identify with whom and in which project you can get things done, collaborate, and edge things forward. We won't get everything done right all of the time. And so we just need to think about how do we progress and make data as a business function more effective. I did skip one thing that came up a lot in my preparation, but I don't think that's unique to data teams. I do think it's an important topic. Managers really need to care about people management. This is crucial. How we feel at work, how we show up. Folks, if you are managers, please prioritize people management and developing those skills, spending time with individuals, helping individuals resolve issues, working on feedback culture. Your people management skill set as a people manager is crucial. And that's all I have to say about that. So, what can we learn from all of this? It sounds like I've been whining and grumping here for a while. Is there anything actionable? Is there anything we can take? I think a lot of this is food for thought and discussion. Management isn't something, and maybe that's why we don't talk about it often. It's not something you can just pick up, learn, do, and get a check mark that it was merged and everything works. One thing I hope you take away from this is that assigning data roles is hard. Our job market is a mess. There's a lot of overlaps between roles, and that's because we're not cats. We're not happy in boxes. What you can do is try to ensure clarity in each project. Discuss regularly with individuals to make sure that they know who's responsible, who has ownership, what tasks are relevant for each case, and coaching, whether by a manager or different roles, coaching each other, supporting each other, learning a few things, not so that they can do each other's roles, but so that they develop an understanding of how they can collaborate better. So yeah, like I said, assigning data roles is hard. That said, a shared understanding and definitions of ready are going to be vital for our work. That is across data roles, across teams, working with other domains. We need to really make sure that we are good collaborators in a business environment. If we are sitting there complaining that we weren't involved early enough, what can we do to make sure that there's a process that it has someone from the data team involved early enough? And for that, I really recommend Shear's talk again. Code quality is your friend. I didn't talk about this at length, but I really think this is valuable, and it also has to do with collaboration. Have all your work in a shared repo. Do code reviews. Don't be afraid of showing or changing your code. The more people know it, the more safe you will feel in taking a sick day, taking a break, and so on. Not everything should be on you. This is a team sport. Also, and I think this is really important, we're all learning here. One of the worst things you can do for a culture in a data team, and maybe in general, is create a space where being wrong is bad. We deal with uncertainty. That's our work. We try things out. Dare I say experiment. There's no blueprints for how to do all the things. Culture really affects people in this, and we need to also realize that going back to how both the job market work, but also how our teams work, being wrong is really, and not being afraid of being wrong or not thinking of it as being wrong is really important. We're seeing that the requirements for junior positions are rising as their salaries are becoming lower, and we're seeing more competition for jobs in our field overall. At the same time, seniors, folks who have been here for 10 to 15 years, and leads, sometimes can feel unsafe to show that there's something they can't do because it's a new thing, or they're out of practice in something that they used to be good at. Really creating a safe, curious work culture is really what we should be doing, and I want to just encourage all of you, once again, to find ways to hire juniors and develop them, because I think we really are at a very tough place with our field and focusing all of what I'm currently seeing quite a lot is that a lot of the job ads are just, everybody just wants a senior. So think about how a junior could write tests for you and make your code better, or any other task that you think someone could learn from and develop and grow within your team. And I also want to take a moment to thank all the people who helped me to get here, to help me to prepare this talk, helped me throughout my career. I couldn't be here by myself. I couldn't do this. I couldn't talk about all of these things. I am not an expert, but I am someone who enjoys learning from others, and I am constantly supported in this, and I'm constantly getting feedback myself, and I've been treated with so much kindness and generosity in our community. I hope you all have the same in your careers, and please stay in touch.
Thank you very much, Noah. So let me just sit and I'll read questions. We have Slido. Many questions came in already.
Yeah.
I'm going to read them too. So, second. So, more questions coming in. Okay, the most popular one from Alina. Alina asks, which metrics would you recommend to use measuring data team performance and contribution to business growth?
Yeah, I think that is a very valuable question. I often talk to other managers about this. Unfortunately, again, we're going to have to say it depends. It depends on what your data team is working on and how they're delivering value to the business. And then the question is, how best can you capture it? I would want to recommend, we tend to like having everything precise and super data-driven. It's OK to use qualitative measures, just so you know.
Next question. What do you think of a specific data team versus distributed data-focused engineers in all different teams?
Great. So like I said, I think we can do a whole talk about this. It's a favorite topic of mine. I think it has a lot to do with how big your organization is and the maturity, like I said before. And very, very kind of Cliff Notes version is in a very small startup, I would expect folks to be more embedded. As the company grows, I expect them to centralize, to try to build expertise and make sure that they really are improving how it is they work. And then as they grow further than that, they could probably move to a hybrid where there's some foundation teams or shared teams that build expertise and tools, and some that folks that are embedded and can work really directly. I would recommend that you, if you are in this model, that you always hire new people into the central teams so they can learn all the best practices and then move into different product and service teams.
Thank you. Alexander asks, any suggestion for how a job candidate can verify that HR has properly understood the role of data scientist/engineer to make sure you just don't end up as an analyst?
That's great. I wish I had the way to decode all of those. I'm afraid that because of the zoo right now, it will have to be in conversation. You need to come up with some good questions to ask as early as possible in the interview process, and you need to be critical. I know it's sometimes hard when you're on the job market. You can't wait to get a job, but it's OK for you to decide that some jobs are not for you, and try to find if there are specific things that you want to do or interested in, or wondering who are the analysts, what will I be doing, how will I be collaborating with them, are the things that, what kind of task will you be doing if it's not in the job description, then try to ask out and see what answers they have for you.
Next question. Do you think there's a difference in understanding between engineering-led and non-engineering-led organizations? How should we account for that?
I'm sure there is. I don't know how some of the things I talked about are going to be directly related to that. I think I've been also and worked with amazing companies that are also, their whole core was a machine learning project, and the founding team was very technical. Of course, that's going to kind of have an impact, but then sometimes in those teams, because folks are so empowered and feel like they understand all the details, then sometimes they're less skilled in data analytics, or they are just think they already know everything and they're not empowering their data teams enough. So those are kind of difficulties you might be facing there. But yeah, there are going to be differences. I don't think I can enumerate them all.
Next question. What is the difference between a data scientist and a data analyst?
Great question. I think there are going to, like we checked before, you're going to find out as many answers as there are people here, if not more. Throughout my talk, I think I kind of separated it as a little bit around whether or not you're building data solutions that other folks will be using, potentially as a product like other users outside of the company, and that are more likely than not to be predictive machine learning or classification problems or something like that. Whereas an analyst usually helps internally to make decisions. We also sometimes call our analytics teams decision science or decision teams, and their science or math skills or algorithm skills are also going to be more towards creating visualizations or doing, like I said, knowing a lot of statistics in order to check for causality. And that's great because if your machine learning team doesn't know how to A/B test their model, then maybe the analyst can come and help.
This one I really love from my heart. How do you manage going from data prototype to data product? Once I presented a prototype, there was an expectation that next week this thing should be a product.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Ask them if they think engineering can take a product from a prototype to a full-fledged product the next day. And if they still say that, then go back and say, well, but what I do is probabilistic, so it's a bit harder. It's not like I can just take this, it will work for any case. We now need to adjust. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you. I'm combining a few questions which are really similar. They are also about management and skills, so I'm just going to read 3 of them. My management has no experience with IT. What books, talks, conferences really, do you recommend for them to understand the data team? Also, as a manager, do you have any guidelines when it's the best to develop an internal capability or to outsource it? And there was one more question about enabling. Yeah, do you have any tips for juniors to overcome this fear, doing things wrong or sharing code? It's more like skill-related questions.
Let's go back. This a lot. So the first one was about
lacking data literacy. And
yes. So like I said, there's a lot of different things that data teams need to accomplish, and there were teams that I was that one of our main things for a quarter or 2 was to improve data literacy in the organization. Help be a part of the solution, like I said, edging things forward, and in doing that, try to not tell people you don't know, but try to come up with, what do you know? Why would you like to use it? How could I be of help? So here, like actually using interview skills, UX research skills would be really useful for your team as you're developing the skill set overall. It's also not all on you, and if you really think that organization isn't going to manage a data team well, you can go to another organization.
Very good.
The second one was about outsourcing.
Yeah, as a manager, do you have any guidelines when it's best to develop an internal capability or outsourcing it?
So I think there's 2 things. If it's going to be a core thing of your product team service for a long time, then developing it in-house is going to be great for you. You're investing in your future. But if there's something where it's not going to be core, or maybe you already have someone in your team that wants to learn this but needs support, then maybe going to a consultant or an expert to kind of help speed you up from where you are, but you do think you already have some of the skill set that are required, that might be a way to think about it. But this is so broad and has so many different cases that it would depend.
Oh. Very good. I see you're speeding up. We have 3 minutes to the coffee break.
Okay.
We have definitely more questions than for 3 minutes. How many questions do you want to take?
I mean, until the coffee break. Let's do that.
Let's go. But I think you're around. You're happy to. I guess you're happy to.
Yes, definitely.
So questions just.
Well, but there was a third one that I haven't answered.
Yes, there's a third one. Do you have any tips for juniors to overcome this fear of doing things wrong or sharing code?
I mean, first, I hope you're in an environment that's supportive. I can't control for your environment, but the one thing I can tell you is that I make mistakes all the time. Everybody I know does. We're all learning, and you don't even know if maybe, like I said, your leads or seniors you're working with also have the same concerns. So maybe talk about it. Hopefully you have psychological safety and you can all figure it out together.
Next question from Eike. When transitioning from a developer to a manager, what were the biggest challenges for you?
So I think one of the biggest challenges was being alone. As soon as you become a manager, and I've recorded a podcast about why you shouldn't be a manager, one of the hardest things for me personally is that you go from being a part of the team to being well, you're a part of the team, but in a very different way. There are certain things you can't discuss. There are certain things that people will stop discussing with you. And while you can talk to other management peers, they're never going to be in your team. So that's, for me, one of the hardest things.
Why the focus on role naming? Isn't it more important what the required skills and experiences are? I
agree. I meant the zoo titles, but it's actually the job description title. Let's make this a broader problem.
Do you have general recommendations, hiring strategies for data scientists, given that the field is too broad?
Hiring is really hard, not just in data teams in general. Hiring is a very, very hard process and task to do well. I guess my biggest tip for this is expect to fail, expect to get things wrong, because it's not always going to be easy, and try to have a conversation. Try to engage with folks and talk to them about what they're interested in, about what you need, and not just check for skills, but really talk to them and check for will they fit the role as far as motivation, interests, the tasks, and so on.
Last questions, I'm sorry. We are already in the coffee break, but this is the last question. How to balance time between skill building and doing deployable work?
Great question. I think that's hard as well. What I've heard, and I think Shir mentioned it last year in her talk as well, is that it might be better to not do a certain % of your time. That I also always found, both as a contributor and as a manager, to be really hard to do. But try to define periods of, like, after you shipped something, give someone from the shipping team a month to go and do and work on something else. So, like, take all of that 10% time and bunch it all together and rotate. We also, when I was working at King, we had a kind of a team where people could rotate in and out to that did more like off-topic things. So maybe those are two approaches that could help.
Great. Thank you so much for the Q&A.
Thank you.